pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, thank you. Not a whole lot of changes to the draft plan that we're asking you to ratify later this evening. I just wanted to draw your attention to a few of the concepts and also a couple additions that we found out today will need to be added. So when you ratify it later, we'll ratify it with the changes as presented. They're really additions more than changes. So just a few themes that I wanted to draw your attention to. Test to stay, depending on which description of test to stay you read, it says it requires a screening program. The ISC seems to think that the screening of close contacts will be adequate to satisfy that requirement. Others say that the spirit of that statement is that you participate in a testing for all program, like SHIELD once a week or something like that. So we're looking for clarification on that. And the discussion is whether or not we can continue with that program either way. So I need a legal opinion on that, but because it's unclear whether or not the health department has the authority to cease and desist our ability to use test to stay if we don't follow their interpretation of it. They likely do, but they likely won't, particularly if our numbers are still good. And everything that we're doing with regard to mitigation strategies is based on whether or not it's working. This board's talked several times about how if a large number of our close contacts are testing positive, we'll have to reevaluate. If none of them are, we get to peel back some layers. And we're still doing a good number of things to promote student and staff health. So we're still learning more about test to stay. The question that we've been exploring now is whether to use SHIELD or use Burn. What's the other one called?
SHIELD or something.
The other one?
I don't, like Bimax or something, it's an odd,
So I actually think it is Bimax or Biomax.
yeah,
That
Bimax.
one is a nasal swab that's self-administered, and we get the results ourselves within 15 minutes, and we can use them right away. That is, I believe, $8 per test, and you know each close contact requires 4 of them. So we're guessing that will cost the district about $40,000 if that program stays in effect for the entire school year. The other test is the SHIELD test, which is the one that's available to schools, all public schools in Illinois, for free. One of the upsides of that is that it is a saliva test. So the students would just deposit saliva into a test tube. The downside is that it's a 24-hour turnaround with results. So that would add an additional day of potential exposure and potentially additional close contacts. The upside of that is those tests would be free, and they have recently said that those can be self-administered. We were worried that perhaps the folks at SHIELD, at the time we believed it was a SHIELD administered only option, and that they had, that they maybe wouldn't be willing to come in as needed, because you know we need them right now when we've got a close contact, and we don't need them at all when we don't. The good news now is that SHIELD can be self-administered, and the test and materials and the reading of the test are all free to public schools. So that would be an added savings. We also like that it's saliva and not the swab. We think that it'll be a bit more tolerable, but we've got the stomach to do either, and I'm just excited about what that does for keeping exposed but healthy kids in school. So we still like it. There just may be a question on this required screening program as a prerequisite to using test to stay. And if it is indeed you must have a screening testing program for all, and we don't. Whether or not we could do it anyway is another question that we need to answer. So we're still staying the course on that. Marion's working very hard getting us prepared to do that, and there'll be more to come on that. So our plan says that that's our primary strategy for students who've been identified as close contacts through our contact tracing program. And then either parents who don't consent to the testing. We adopted 2 of the different quarantine programs. The first is for students who can get a COVID test on day 6 of the quarantine. They'll get the results on day 7, they can return on day 8 and just be observed for the remainder of the 14. The other choice is if parents don't take their child to be tested on day 6 or later, they will quarantine for 10 days and then return to school and be observed through day 14. So that is still an option for us if we're ever lacking testing materials, if we're ever lacking the resources to deliver, to administer and read the test, or if a family doesn't give consent to testing, that's still an option. I also want to share with the board that I learned that the guidance was taken down off of ISBE's website over the weekend, and it disappeared for a couple days. And new guidance and new frequently asked questions were published today. I read them quickly in preparation for the meeting, and I don't see really any substantive changes. I was hoping for some clarification on test to stay, but that was not found in there. But I just want the board to understand that it's still a moving target, and inside this plan, I'm sure you saw that it talks about the need to increase or decrease mitigation strategies based on our results. Of course, if no one is getting sick in our schools, no one is transmitting the disease in our schools, and the governor rolls back the mask mandate, that would be an opportunity for us to move from masks required for all to masks recommended for the unvaccinated and welcome for all. And hopefully that will be in our future someday, relatively soon. And of course, if we have high rates of infection, if we have a lot of transmission in the schools, we'll need to reconsider some of the other things that we've rolled back. And the understanding that this plan was written in the spirit of student instruction is our focus, and academic and social and emotional learning and well-being of students. So when you read this and you see places where it takes some liberties, it's understanding that is our priority. The priority to have a high-quality school experience for all students. We've also discovered additional mitigations for band and choir. I haven't read those yet, but I suspect that they're kind of in the spirit of the additional mitigation strategies that we had last spring. Those are not yet in the plan, and we intend to add them to the plan as written once we've reviewed them, if we think that they're good. So that's something that when you're making your motion second and casting your vote tonight, consider that there will be a chapter about band and choir mitigation strategies in the plan that isn't in the plan tonight. And of course, you'll see those before we etch them in stone. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the community since our last meeting. You'll notice 2 meetings ago, the one that we had on a Sunday, there was a large anti-mask contingent that was vocal during that, and that also emailed or messaged the board or myself around that. When we left that meeting with the intention of recommending masks for the unvaccinated and welcoming masks for all, but not requiring them or checking, you'll notice that in our last meeting, there was a lot of pro-mask community members that turned out and that have since emailed you or I about either thank you for upholding the governor's order, etc. And I just think it's important for the community to understand that when we met on that first meeting, the one that happened on the Sunday, we had just received guidance from ISB that said local school boards were going to have the discretion to make these decisions based on their data relevant to their school district. And this board did that, and I thought did it conscientiously. After that is when we received the governor's mask order for all, regardless of vaccination status in schools. And that's what's reflected in this plan. And we don't have good numbers on how many folks think this and how many folks think that and how many folks are in the middle with an opinion but perhaps trusting the schools to do what we believe is best. But I think it's important for the community to understand that we're a school district and our job is educating children, and we're not a political action committee. So we're not in the business of alienating one portion of our population in the spirit of fighting a political fight for another. We are navigating a landscape that's largely being handed to us by Springfield and executing that within the letter of the law to the best extent possible for the kids of District 146. So the idea that the board is with this group or the board is with that group, there's just, it's just not an accurate representation of what the work that this board is doing and the work that the administration is doing. So keep that in mind, and when you look at the mitigation strategies and our ability to peel them back as things improve, it says very clearly there that that's if there's not an executive order requiring us not to. Masks is the obvious example. So the first thing that needs to happen in order for us to consider going from masks required to masks recommended for the unvaccinated and welcome for all is that order expiring. So as long as that order is in place, we're required to comply with that. The idea that we can be a change agent by violating that order is not only not our function, but it's also not accurate. ISB is an agent of the executive branch of the state of Illinois government, and they set the standard of care for the public school industry. So if they say they're going to enforce a governor's mask mandate by refusing to approve or revoking a school's recognition of schools, that's the first thing of about 4 things that leads to a school district no longer being a school. So the governor does indeed have the executive authority to do that. Our council agrees. The other major firms that represent public schools in our area agree. And they also agree that ISB indeed has the authority to do that. So if you like what we're doing, great. If you don't, it may be misguided to think that is something that you should blame this board for. So that's just my little introduction there, and there's been a lot of talk about what choices we have and what choices we don't. And this plan is filled with choices that the administration recommended to the board or that the board supported, because we believe that within the rules of the game, this is the safest and best way for us to carry on educating kids at a high level. And we're not just talking about academic learning, but we're talking about the psychological fitness of our kids. We're talking about the social emotional growth and learning and the entire school experience. So I think that the plan does a nice job representing that, and I'm happy to recommend it later for adoption later in the meeting.
Josh, I have a question, maybe you can clarify. This mandates are nothing new. We have several mandates from both the state and the federal government, many of them unfunded, which has been a frustration for decades. I'm sure everyone along this table, administrators and board members alike, would love to go cherry pick mandates that we would prefer not to have to enforce. But the state does audit, the federal government does audit. They do audits of school districts to ensure that their mandates are being complied with. And there are penalties to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Dean. So we're governed by the school code, which is the section of Illinois law that governs public schools. And ISB is essentially the governor's agency that not only implements, enforces, and audits school districts to make sure that we're compliant with the law, but also makes recommendations to the governor and to the General Assembly for new laws. This is a little bit different being an executive order, but it certainly has the same teeth. And this board in the past has resisted and opposed mandates, particularly unfunded mandates, even when we supported the content of them.
It's true.
Because we don't believe that it's the best place to make, that Springfield is the best place to make a decision that could otherwise be customized for each individual school district in the state of Illinois. We take local control very seriously here. And we have counterpart boards in other parts of the state where life is quite different, the culture is quite different. I've worked in a couple of them. And we celebrate the idea that school may look a bit different there than it does here. In fact, we believe that perhaps it should. The local needs assessment is completely different. The types of careers and experience that they're gonna have after public school are quite different. So they may need different skills, certainly a different life experience in other parts of the state. It's a very, very diverse state. So we celebrate the idea of local control, and we do that even when we're on the right side of whatever individual bill it is. But the ones that we oppose hurt more, because they make us to do things that we don't want to do, or we don't agree with or think are best. And that's very, very challenging. And for some, masks are an example of that. But health and safety isn't the only category where that happens. It happens in curriculum, it happens in school finance, it happens in transportation, food service. It happens in virtually everything that we do. And the reason why that happens, whether we like it or not, is we're a public school. So we fall under the school code portion of Illinois state law, and the General Assembly and the governor are the governing body for that, and ISB sets the standard of care by law. So here we are. That said, I think that wearing the masks this year, particularly if we're able to make test to stay work, is going to return us to a much more normal school experience other than having masks on our faces. Because students will be able to learn cooperatively, they'll be able to work more closely together, they'll be able to do all the types of things that we've always been used to doing, and more of them will be able to stay in school. So I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward, I had a conversation with Jill today, I'm looking forward to the day where we can do all those things without masks on our face. But I'm happy that there's a vehicle for us to get to there on the first day of school, and in this case, are the key to that. Before I move on to the next topic.
Are we making comments on this plan now, or are we gonna do it when we bring it up later?
Either way.
All right, all right, because I just reading it through, I just have a few comments that one, we are talking about, in terms of changing, any modifications to the mitigation strategies. I do think it's strange that the number of positive cases for the previous week in the district was 3 or fewer. Am I reading that correctly? that seems to be entirely too low a number.
Yeah, I mean, that's a number that is up to the board. We checked with some other local school districts, and that was similar. We also looked back at our positivity rate in the spring. There were a couple weeks where we had 4 or 5 or 6 positives in a week. There were many, many weeks where we had 0 or 1. So,
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm just, the number 3 stands out to me because basically, in February, my whole family got COVID, and it seems, including my 3 children tested positive, and it seems like, so basically what you're saying is that February of last year, if the Lloyd kids got COVID, then the entire district is off mitigating?
yeah.
I mean, to me, that just seems like,
The plan also says that we can do different things for different school buildings. So I think if we have a situation, there was a stretch of weeks where 2 of our schools had no positives, none. And it'll be up to the board whether or not you want us to say that those campuses can unmask while other campuses are still masked. Where we're at right now is, it sure looks like this governor's order is gonna go into October. And what I'd like to do is track the actual number of positives during that period of time and review those numbers with the board, so the board can set the number that you want. You know, 3 or fewer is where we landed. You'll notice that we chose 100 cases per 100,000 for our 3 communities. That's the orange to red threshold. Vern's done a lot of work on the numbers and really believes that blue is unattainable, and yellow.
It's 1 in 10,000 knocks you out of the blue. That's completely unattainable.
So we took a higher standard, what the CDC would consider a higher standard on that measure. But I really think that the magic is what's happening inside the district. If there's lots of people getting infected, we should do more, and if there's few, we should do less. And between now and when that mask order ceases, we can make that number whatever the board is comfortable with. I'd like to show you the first few weeks of school's data, so you have an idea of what it's gonna be like, and then you can set that number however you want. If the board wants a different number in the plan right now, we can have that discussion right now and change it before you adopt it.
Yeah, I was concerned when I saw those numbers too, and, you know, when you explained that those numbers were based on last year, made me feel a little better, you know, because I looked at 3 and I was thinking we might never get to that. There's also just the section in here that talks about low positivity rates within the community and/or district could result in mask recommended instead of mask required. Right now, I'm more comfortable with leaving something like that instead of having hard numbers that I'm not sure if they're attainable, but.
Yeah, the metrics were in the spirit of how the board left it last time, that they wanted a clear, measurable road to masks recommended. If you think that we were too cautious with the 3, we can reconsider that number right now. Were there other measures in there that you thought were too?
that was the one that jumped out at me.
How do you like the 100 per 100,000?
That, I guess that's fine, I don't really have a sense, you know, I mean,
An argument for,
I mean, if it's, you know, that's like the orange zone or whatever, I guess. You know, I mean, to me, it's not so much the numbers in the district as it is the transmission in the school. That's the whole point of the mask. So if we're not seeing I'd be more focused on, are kids coming to school and getting COVID? Because if they're not, that's why we have a mask. It's not, you know, I mean, obviously, there's a factor of, you know, kids in the district having it, but again, the whole point was, I mean, obviously, kids last year had it. What was frustrating last year was that we were quarantining all these kids that weren't getting it. And so, from my perspective, like, to me, it's much more interesting to say, what's the transmission rate as opposed to what's the number in the schools, right?
yeah, that's the one that is most powerful to us too. The problem is, it's also the hardest one to really nail down for certain. You know, the 2 students that may have contracted COVID in school we don't know. So I don't want to take responsibility for those 2 COVID cases. We were also 6 feet apart and masked and sitting in rows and facing the same direction, like a number of things that we're not doing now. So I don't want to set it so high that we take our masks off and then we have an outbreak. I don't know which mitigation strategies are the most effective, because last year we did all of them. So it's gonna be interesting, but, I can certainly stomach that number at 4 or 5. I don't think that you should pick a big number, but we are gonna be looking at, if we're able to do test to stay, how many people who are close contacts at school test positive. That's gonna be a really powerful number. I just don't know. I don't know how big a number, I mean, it could be 0 or it could be all of them. You know, we need to live in that for a little while. And the nice thing is, during the mask order, we're gonna have school, so we're gonna have data on whether or not 3 feet in mask is working. And if it's working wonderfully and the order goes away, then let's try it without masks.
I like your idea of looking at the data, not setting assessing the number, if it does go to October, assessing it then.
Thank you.
You know, I would echo what Julie said. We're a moving target right now. Gosh knows, in the last week and a half, the guidance has changed 3 times, 4 times. And since we're currently under the mask mandate, there's no chance that we're rolling back anyway. So I don't personally feel any push to change that number right now, because we will have the first month or so of data before we even get close to changes. And I know that if this board has strong feelings about that number or what we're going to do then, of course, we're going to be talking about that when it happens as well. So it's kind of this is a living, breathing document, and we are going to be constantly looking at it for the next entire school year and probably then some.
So then, I guess that leads into my second question, which is to say, it's my understanding there was a lawsuit filed against the governor today. So what happens, what's our mechanism for reconsidering this in the event that there's some sort of preliminary injunction? If it is possible that if a judge rules that the governor has exceeded his authority, then we're back to square one, I guess, right?
Sure, we can reconvene and reconsider anytime we want.
Okay. I think that's just something we need to be aware of. Because, I mean, right now, I mean, I do believe, the governor, whether I agree with him or not, has the authority to issue this. But if circumstances change, I will be very much interested in, and the circumstances may change. And my only point is that there is a non-zero chance that the governor is not the only one who has a say in this at this point. A judge could theoretically rule that he's exceeded his authority, and in which case I'd be wanting to change this document pretty substantially, pretty quickly.
I typically celebrate and enjoy the relationships that we have with other policymakers in the state, but I will say that I was talking to Dean earlier about the governor's address. And what we've been through this summer was, in my opinion, unnecessary. They told us in May that we would know by June 7th or 8th what the rules were going to be for opening school. On July 18th, we were told that it was up to local school boards. So we spent a lot of time in the next 2.5 or 3 weeks getting smart about it so that this board could make good decisions. The board, in my opinion, did, and then days later, that decision was taken away from the board. And the first thing that the governor said was that the reason why he had to do a mask order is because not enough districts did the right thing. Well, that suggests to me that local boards didn't have the authority all along. Local boards had the authority as long as they made the choice that the governor wanted them to make. Well, that's not choice at all, is it? It's maybe the optics of choice for a couple weeks, but if they were going to do, and I understand the science is changing and what we're learning is changing and what we're learning about the new variants changing quickly. I understand and respect and empathize with the jobs of the health departments and the recommendations they need to make. They're under a good deal of pressure as well, and they're trying to nail down new science, which is challenging too. But to say we're gonna have choice and then say he's taking it away because we didn't make the right choice, doesn't sound to me like choice at all. So, so here we are, executing the governor's will. Hopefully it will go very well. I think that it will. And hopefully it goes well enough where he retracts that, or it sunsets quickly, and then this board will have another decision to make then, and this plan has a mechanism in it for you to do so, and do so quickly. So we also understand that if that doesn't work, this board may choose to put them back on and off as numbers rise and fall if necessary, in order to keep the kids safe and in order to keep the school experience good. And that's our objective. So if you have other comments or questions that you think about throughout the meeting, we'll have a comment moment before adoption, and we can talk more about it then. Otherwise, if anyone else has other thoughts or comments, otherwise I'll move on to the next item in the superintendent's report.
I just have a question on the test to stay, which you may not have the answer to, but when you talked about the shield test and the 24-hour turnaround, does the student stay in school for those 24 hours?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
Jill, let me amend that a little bit. If the governor's mask order expires and the board says that the metrics are good enough for us to go to mask recommended, during test to stay, students must be masked in school. So that student will stay in school, but they'll be putting on a mask. And there's a little bit of concern. That's why I keep saying this masks welcome for all, is I don't want to get into a scarlet letter situation where we're identifying students someday as unvaccinated because they're the ones wearing the masks, or a student as exposed to COVID because they're the ones wearing the mask. Anyone can wear a mask at any time. But during the test to stay program, whether masks are required for all or not, students that are close contacts and participating in test to stay must wear a mask. And that's for 14 days. But it's a small price to pay to stay in school.
right, and so I would just wanted to clarify that they don't have to stay out of school for 24 hours until their result.
That's
And then a
correct.
few days later, do that again.
As long as they don't have a test or they have a negative test, they're still in school.
And then there is another area that talks about a sibling who would not be eligible for test to stay, which is just a little,
Yeah, I
is
push-
that based on the guidelines that were given if we participate in this program? Because, you know, again, the goal is to keep as many kids in school as possible. So if they're a close contact at school versus at home, but they're still in our district, I just,
Yeah,
I'm
that's.
confused why we can't test them.
Yeah, we actually pushed back against that one with the health department on Friday and with the region today. And it was unequivocal, black and white. Test to stay is only students who were close contacts at school are eligible for test to stay. One of the reasons is because they were both masked then. It's gonna be interesting whether or not we can stick with test to stay if we go masks recommended down the road. I don't know where that authority lies, but I'm hoping that we can, because I think it's a great program whether we're wearing masks or not. But it was unanimous from two different bodies that using test to stay to keep people who were close contacts at home or in the community still in school is a non-starter, not acceptable, and you're disqualified from using that as a quarantine strategy. So it just sounds like we big fat can't.
Did they give you any kind of explanation why? I mean, if the kid is negative, the kid is negative,
Yeah, the
or
only-
positive is positive.
The only explanation why that I heard is that siblings are intermingling all the time at home and they're not masked. The mask ingredient was the key ingredient there. Remember that one of the motivators for us talking about masks before the governor ordered us to put them on was how good the test to stay program was and how that was a hard requirement of it. So people who call the school and say, hey, my son's traveling whatever team, had an outbreak and my child was exposed, they would do one of the other two quarantining exercises, either stay at home 6 days, get tested, get a negative result, come back and be observed, or stay home for 10 days, come back masked and be observed for 4 more. So,
And this is a change, where they took the kid, or that was always part of the test?
that was always part of it. They're just doing a better job communicating all the rules.
I'd like to ask about the busing. It says in the, that the buses would need to be cleaned between routes, and a concern would be how long that takes. And with our shortage of bus drivers, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, Money, interrupt me whenever you want, but you know, we've got those 4 routes at Central that as of today will need to be doubled. And the time that it takes to clean those buses in between those expands the time interval between the first round arriving and the second round arriving. Have you talked to ABC about cleaning in between those? So maybe you and Marion should sit down with them and talk about that. So it's no big deal between the middle routes and the elementary routes.
Right.
That's something we did in the spring. And it's an interesting topic, Julie. I'm glad you raised it, because enhanced cleaning strategies is still listed in the mitigation strategies of ISB's back-to-school plan. But health agencies are minimizing that a bit because they don't believe that touch surfaces are a major transmission vector. So it may not be necessary to do that. And that would be better, because that first round of buses could sleep in a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because further down it says shared objects or equipment will be cleaned and sanitized before and after use when possible. So if we could just add when possible for the bus cleaning, especially if it means that kids don't have to get dropped off
Right.
30, 40 minutes early.
Yeah, I mean, if masks are required on the buses, so their ability to touch a seat and then touch their nose is greatly diminished by the mask wearing. So Jeff will talk to our head nurse about that and give an opinion. I'd love to save those 10 minutes off of that interval for other themes about, before we move on in the superintendent's report? We'll have another opportunity later.
Oh, absolutely. Moving on.
Next, I'd like to introduce Matt. He's going to talk a little bit about construction at Fierick and Cruz.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Since last Thursday's construction update that was provided to you in board docs, I have a little more information on the progress of the construction at Cruz and Fierick. Since last Thursday, the Cruz main office countertops have been installed. All work associated with the skylights, there was some drywall work and painting within, has been completed along with the skylights. The new LED light fixtures in the media center at Cruz were finished over the weekend, and all of the media center carpeting was installed last Friday. We have a few remaining items. At this point, the Fierick countertops are delayed to the extent that the general contractor is having temporary countertops fabricated and will be installed later this week. They currently have the finished product scheduled for the 20th of August, but we insisted that they get us temporary solution in case that 20th does not happen. We also have some stair nosing on the 2 steps leading from the media center to the stage, which is back ordered. It's supposed to be in this week, and then they can finish the carpeting on those 2 steps and be completely finished. We also have casework drawers are scheduled to be delivered tomorrow. They were delayed. and the lockers has remained unchanged since the beginning of the project. They informed us last Thursday that they're still confident that the delivery will be on the 13th, with demolition of the locker rooms occurring on the 16th, only when they arrive. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, great work. Now, Jeff Charleston's gonna talk about food service and transportation.
Yes, for food service, I have a bit of good news. The state has a program that they normally operate in the summer in low-income districts that they're now expanding to all districts statewide for the school year, called the Seamless Summer Option. And what that means is that all students will be able to eat for free this coming year, regardless of free, paid, or reduced status. So that's good news. Now, as you know, we partner with Orland. The food is prepared at their district, and then we transport it here. So we're working out some logistics. We're anticipating an increase in numbers and the need of extra food. So we're working out to make sure that Quest can provide the amount of food that we need, and that we have the truck capacity to get it here. But those are good problems, and so good news for the upcoming year.
I have a quick question on that. Will Quest still provide like the monthly menus to everyone? So that
Yes.
parents can plan
Yes.
ahead? Okay, awesome,
Yep.
thank you.
And then on transportation, we touched on it a little bit here, but as some of you may have heard, there's a national bus driver shortage, and our companies have been telling us since the springtime that they're looking, but they're having trouble recruiting drivers. And so ABC is our regular ed provider, and right now it appears that they're going to be 4 drivers short of servicing our routes. So right now at Central Middle School, we have 16 routes, and they only have 12 drivers for us. So that means they're going to have to take 4 routes and double them. So 4 sets of kids are going to have to come in early. Then those routes will go back out and run the remaining 4 routes. And then the same thing after school. So we're working it out so it's not the same kids having to get in early or leave late, but it's going to affect a lot of people. We are on them. We've been trying everything. We've been contacting other bus companies who are short themselves, so we've not been able to find additional drivers. So we're just going to have to deal with it for a little while, but they are doing everything they can to recruit as many drivers as they can.
Any comments or questions about transportation? So we have 2 condolences this month. Mary Shinoda's mother passed away. Mary's an ESL teacher at Fulton. And Lynn, Rachel, and Andrew Sebastian lost their mother. Lynn is a para at Fulton, Rachel an early learning para at Fulton, and Andrew is a para at CMS. So we extend our deepest sympathy to Mary and her family, as well as the Sebastian family. We've got a nice list of celebrations. Allie Bober and her family welcomed Amelia Page, who was born on July 15th. Allie's a teacher at Memorial. Ann Collins is celebrating the birth of her 10th grandchild, Margaret Kathleen Johnson. Margaret was born on July 5th. Caitlin Caprio and family welcomed Lorenzo Antonio, who was born June 30th. And Nikki Road, an 8th grade ELA teacher, welcomed Delaney James into the world on June 25th. Sandy Wojcik, 8th grade math and science teacher. Her son Dylan James was born June 23rd. And Jess Edgar, 4th grade teacher at Memorial, welcomed Charlotte Carroll on June 16th. So we're so excited about the new members to the 146 family. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. All right, we're up to 4.1. Citizens may address the board at this time. As I say before every public comment, we are very, very aware that opinions in the community run the gamut on many issues, not just masks, not just COVID, but many, many things. We ask that everyone remain respectful, that everyone be respectful of the time limit. You will have 3 minutes to speak. I will be timing. And we encourage everyone to speak, and we encourage everyone at home watching. You are not able to speak during public comment, but you are able to email the board or Dr. Stawick and the administration your thoughts as well. So with that, I'm going to open for public comment. Again, please be respectful. You will have 3 minutes. Thank you. Anyone willing to address the board?
Hello, my name is Kim Saraki. When did we stop living life and started living in fear? Tomorrow isn't promised to anyone, so live life to the fullest and let the kids be kids again. Back in 2009, H1N1 swine flu pandemic infected and killed more kids than COVID had. Did we shut down and wear face masks? No, we didn't. So why are we so afraid when this doesn't affect kids like H1N1 did? Here are the numbers according to the CDC of what kids are more likely to die of. Suicide, 3,000 deaths per year. Cardiac distress, 2,000 deaths per year. Cancer, 1,800 deaths per year. Car crash, 636 deaths per year. Seasonal flu, 2018-2019, 477 deaths. COVID, over the course of 18 months, 349. H1N1 swine flu, just 1 year, was 1,100. COVID isn't going anywhere, so we have to live with this just like anything else. As far as these mandates, they are just recommendations, guidance, not laws. Stop saying that your hands are tied, especially when other schools are figuring it out. If we are masking our children just to protect teens and adults from COVID, then guess what? I have groundbreaking news. There's a vaccine just for that. The CDC mentioned 2 weeks ago that the PCR tests are faulty and they can't tell the difference between the flu and COVID. Interesting, since the flu magically disappeared. Stop testing. FYI, our lawmakers never gave authority to ISB, CDC, or the governor to decide when and if my child must wear a face mask. All authority given to schools falls under 105 ILCS or Administrative Code 23. I urge you to read and find one line that would grant that authority to require masks in school. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. You are elected officials by we the people, and we the people have had enough. In case you haven't figured this out, if you don't draw the line here, it never ends. It's time for the school board, admin, and parents to stand up for our children's rights. Unmask our children. Thank you.
Hello, Peterson. Hi, my name is David Saraki. I did prepare a speech. I just had a couple quick comments. Obviously, we didn't see the whole plan and what the mitigation strategy looks like for this upcoming school year. But what I would like to see is, and I don't even know if it's possible, is that last school year when the kids were outside learning, they were socially distanced extensively. It was over 6 feet, and they still had to wear their masks. I don't know if the flexibility is there this year, if that could be a possible mask break, because I know last year they talked about the kids having mask breaks, during, if they were outdoor learning, but that didn't happen. So I'm not sure if that's something that can be implemented. And then the other thing was if the mandate ends or whatever and we start peeling the layers back, if another parent mentioned it last week, I thought it was a great idea to, even before the complete removal of masks, there was an option to where the kids in the classroom could take the masks off to make it optional. So it's like they're still using them in the hallways, going to the bathrooms, but at least at the desk, it could be like, that could be like the first layer coming back. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
my name is Brian Garland. My daughter is a preschooler here. Hopefully this is a topic we can all agree on. Tonight I'd like to speak about critical race theory in the hallways and classrooms of District 146, which according to my eyes is very real. Board of Education, please review queerkidstuff.com and Learning for Justice. To be honest, I wanted to come here guns blazing, but after some discussions with people I trust, they told me to tone it down. In recent weeks, I stumbled upon some of these posters, like this one, in the hallways of Central Middle School. This picture is Lindsay Amir that states, "We, the future, are unapologetically queer." And there's another poster in the hallway right outside from Learning for Justice. According to the mission statement of queerkidstuff.com, Amir created the site as a LGBTQ and social justice web series for kids. It adds that the short videos are a tool for parents, teachers, and LGBTQ adults to help them explain these words and ideas to young children in their lives, recommended for all ages. I FOIA'd the district this morning to obtain all copies, curriculum, training, education, contracts, etc. within the district pertaining to critical race theory. Once received, I will move forward accordingly. If members Barry, Casper, and Lloyd remember a conversation we had in my driveway in March pre-election, you guys told me there is no room in our classrooms for politics and CRT, which includes LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, and 1619 Project. I proudly planted Barry, Lloyd, Dunlap, and Shalada's name in my lawn, and I campaigned for you in the small corner of my world. I assured my family and friends who voted for you that they could trust that I would be watching our board. So here I am. Against my intuition, I will give you the benefit of doubt that you simply didn't know. But now consider yourselves warned that CRT is happening in your schools. Tonight, are you going to tell me that the posters aren't CRT? If so, you're dead wrong. Critical racism theory has no room in our classrooms, and I demand that all posters and curriculum be stopped immediately. Us parents will be watching, we will not be backing down, and we will defend our kids. I truly look forward to see what the FOIA request reveals.
30 seconds.
Please let me know when the posters are taken down at Central Middle School. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shane Wilson. My son will be an 8th grader here at Central. I have to agree with Mr. Siraki about something. We don't really know what we're talking about. You all do. You've seen this plan. The last we got to hear about the plan was at a meeting a week ago, before the governor's order came down. So we're speaking about assumptions. I'm assuming that you're going to have masks in school. I'm assuming that you're going to have masks in all schools for everyone. I'm assuming that's why you're all wearing masks tonight when you weren't a week ago. But that's an assumption. I don't really know what your plan is. I'm grateful that you're doing that. I think that's the right move. You know, Mr. Lloyd complained last week. He said that the government was forcing you all to make the decision, that the onus was being put on you. Now the government has taken that away from you, and I think you're upset about that as well. The truth is, it really doesn't seem to be the issue anymore whether or not masks work. We know masks work. That's the reason people like me want you to be mandating masks, want you to do more than recommending, because it protects people who do not have COVID from getting it. It protects people who have COVID from transmitting it. That's a known fact. The issue seems to be that we don't care about that, that the safety of our children is not the issue. It's inconvenient. I know there are people in this room who believe that because they're not wearing masks now, despite the fact that it's required. I don't know when it became inconvenient to look out for the safety of our children. And my biggest concern is that the moment you guys get a positive number, and I mean positive in the sense of encouraging, enthusiastic, that you're gonna rush to take these away. You've been behind the curve each step of the way. You know, when, a year ago at this time, we were all ready to go guns blazing with just normal school until the government shut it down. The first chance you got last spring, you eliminated all those requirements, despite the fact that this very administration recommended against it. That didn't matter. The recommendation of educators and experienced physicians was thrown out the window because you didn't want it. So,
30 seconds.
thank you. I'm asking you to have a different approach this time around. I'm asking you to be patient. I'm asking you to see this through. I'm asking you to let masks, let hopefully vaccines for all of our elementary school students, let these things do their job before we race to do something that maybe isn't in the best interest of public health, that maybe teaches a different lesson to our students. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Sandra Bailey. I wanted to bring up something that was already talked about. I spoke about it again last week, is the removal of the masks in the classroom. I want you to think about it every time you go. Now, the governor said, put your mask back on. Okay, let's put them back on. I want you to go to a restaurant and keep your mask on the whole time, if that's what you want our children to do in the classroom. Because when you sit down at the restaurant, you take your mask off. So the children should have the same right to sit down, take their mask off. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Sander, and I have 2 kids. One going at this school, the other one going at here. What I want to say, it's the mouth is the dirtiest thing of the human being. Are you guys agreeing with me?
Sir, this is not for dialogue between the board. This is
No.
time for your comments.
Okay, so what I want to say is we are wearing this. The virus, it's way smaller than this mask. It's like we're putting a fence against mosquitoes. It's proven. And we have Luc Montagnier, we have Didier Raoul, we have the other Japanese Nobel Prize doctors. They are all working. Our kids, they're going to school in fear. They can't see a face expression, anything. So you're telling me this will save our kids, this? We can't control them in our houses. Look at them, they go nuts. Because what? Or for what? They're getting sick? There is no doubt about that. Nope. Nope, no doubt about that. So what I want to say is, these masks, they don't help us. How do they build their immunity? Getting dirty. Am I right? I am. Everybody knows it. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna keep hiding till our governments decide that we are free again? So my thing is, I don't want my kids wearing masks. I'm not scared. Neither they are. That's all I have to say.
We've lived in this school district. My husband was born in this school district. He went through it. My 4 children went through it. We now have been listening to things, and they said, get involved. in your school district, in your village, to see what's going on. I already have found out some of the things I was going to ask. I was going to ask about critical race theory in the schools. I wanted to know, do we say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school?
Again, ma'am, this is not a back and forth.
How do I find that information out?
You can email the superintendent if you'd like to know.
Okay, and everything that I wanted to say, people have been saying. They say they cannot isolate the COVID virus. So why don't we test the kids for the flu before we test them to see if they have COVID, since they can't tell the difference between the two? In Alberta, Canada, all the mandates have been lifted because no one could give a sample of a COVID virus to prove that there is a COVID virus. So why in the schools you have to test for COVID? Why don't you test for the flu? Or why don't you ask the governor to produce for you a COVID virus to prove that there is something that we're fighting? It's a shame that my grandchildren are so afraid to hug you or touch you, or when you go to school now, that you have a best friend in the playground and you can't even hold their hand to play with because you have to stay 3 feet away. You meet kids at school, you don't even know what they look like. For you to go play with them another time, or you see them on the street, you don't even know who that you're looking at. So like I said, my husband and I, we don't have any children here, but we will be coming to these meetings to find out what's going on in the school district, because I do think it's a shame that you're masking all these children when the virus for a child is 99.99% recoverable, even if they get it, and you're doing this to them all day long. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment?
Sarah Lopez, I have kids at Fulton and a daughter at Central. We've been parents in this district for 12 years approximately, and in the last year and a half that my kids have been in the school district, their esteem has dropped dramatically. Their ability to communicate just with their siblings, with their peers, they feel socially isolated because of this mask. Unmask these kids. There's no need for it. I absolutely disagree with it. My kids are more, they feel more the need to have this on their face than anything, and it's saddening. They are more shy than ever. They are less likely just to even come up to our family and be around them like they might have been 18 months ago, before all this nonsense became our unfortunate reality. And when or if one of my kids is forced to stay home because they were in close contact, the cross-checking last school year was, crappy. If there is the need for, I'm assuming there's going to be a cross-checking, which is also nonsense, that should be improved. My 2 little ones at Fulton were forced to stay home too many times because of close contact nonsense, which sucked their esteem. And it sucked my daughter's kindergarten abilities to just be where she should be academically. But my Fulton school district, the school there rather, was not on top of letting Central know that maybe my daughter should have been home as well. I was like, I'm not going to pull my daughter out of school because she's fine. I didn't want to pull my son, but I had to because he's a sibling, which is just ridiculous. We had never done this before. When there's flu pandemics, when there's nasty cold, it's just not necessary. When my kids are outside in gym class, when they're outside at recess, they get winded and they don't want to be as active because they have this thing on their face, and it's not really a true mask break because they are still forced to wear it. And how are they truly getting a break? How are they truly getting the chance to see their peers? And
30 seconds.
empathy? They can't. I mean, when you have this over your face and the only thing you can really see of someone else is their eyes. And as a kindergarten first grader, they don't necessarily read a person's face as well as my junior high kid. It's just, it's not the way these kids need to be. So these masks need to go.
Hi, Crystal Schultz. I have two boys. You remember me from 2 board meetings ago. March 13th, 2020 was their last day at Fulton. Since then, we have homeschooled. I was really hopeful on July 18th that there was a chance that my kids would be able to come back to Fulton. We love, love, love Fulton. My kids are sad that they don't go to Fulton anymore. Not that they don't love me and they don't love me as their teacher, because we certainly had a great school year going on field trips and being able to just live freely. I think it's really sad what we're doing to our children. Both of my kids have had IEPs. My son had speech therapy from the time he was 7 months old because he had feeding and swallowing issues. Therefore, he relies on lip reading, and he also still relies on people to be able to read his lips. That's impossible with a mask. My other son has OT issues. Thankfully, both of them graduated out of their IEPs in January of 2020 by the grace of God. And 2 months later, the pandemic hit, so they no longer need the school services. But the social, emotional factors in this are being overlooked. My son had problems with coping mechanisms and negative self-talk when he was in kindergarten and first grade, and his kindergarten and first grade teacher were just wonderful, along with a lot of the other social workers and psychologists that work at Fulton. Just love them. One of my favorite parts about Fulton was the community and the events that you all would have, and the family nights and the gatherings, and being able to come to school and volunteer in the classroom for various events like that. And just the thought that that isn't going to happen either is really just doing our children a disservice. And another year of this is nonsense. And I will not be sending my kids to Fulton, unfortunately, and I'm going to have to tell them that because 2 weeks ago I was pretty hopeful, and they were too. And I'm sad. That's all.
Additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. 5.1, union reports. Is there a union report? No report from the union. 6.1, consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve item 6.1, approval of minutes, 6.2, approval of closed session minutes, 6.3, approval of the destruction of closed session tapes, 6.4, approval of financial items, and 6.5, approval of personnel items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, in the minutes, Jeff, I emailed you today, then I just wanted to clarify that it states that the board would like to hold the graduation outdoors with a rain date scheduled indoors, and to clarify that that's not a final decision, and that the board will be updated on the cost of holding the graduation off-site before that's made permanent.
It will be noticed.
Further discussion? Hearing none, Secretary, call the roll.
Casper.
Yes.
Dunlap. Yes. Malloy.
Yes.
Chilada.
Yes.
Lloyd, yes. Barry.
Yes.
Nenza.
Yes. 6.6, approval of District 146, 2021-2022 COVID-19 response plan.
I guess, you know, kind of, a number of the parents did raise something. My understanding is the mask mandate is indoor only. There will be outdoor mask breaks, correct?
That's correct.
I mean, outdoor sports are no masks, right?
Whenever students are outdoors, they do not need to wear their mask.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move we adopt 6.6 approval of District 146, 2021-2022 COVID-19 response plan as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to talk about something about it, like school-sponsored activities. I didn't see too much. We talked about extracurricular clubs, sports, and other activities. We're planning on bringing some of those back to the district this year. Okay, because I think it's important. It's a good point that got brought up. You know, family engagement is very important to me, and I'd like to see that happen as soon as possible.
We intend to have open houses and parent-teacher conferences in person. Parent-teacher conferences is something we should probably talk about because of how successful they were virtually. So maybe there can be more than one component. But open houses in person, restoration of field trips. All of our students will be in person, so clubs will be in person, obviously athletics. So very much a return to pre-COVID school life.
I'd like to keep the community coming in, keep it as open as possible. There was another, this is kind of insubstantial, but there was a line about deliveries limited to vestibules for visitors. Do we think that that's still necessary? You know, someone dropping something off for their student, they can't stop into the school office anymore?
Well, it's just a matter of reducing the introduction of potentially more close contacts. It's still recommended, and
Well, to Joe's point, isn't a definition of a close contact meaning you have to be close for 15 minutes? I mean, do we find that parents linger in the office for?
yeah, no, they're not here for 15 minutes. Transmission is really more of a factor than close contact for a visitor.
Yeah, I would,
Talking about parents dropping off or like the delivery?
Right.
Like the kids
Parents
ordering
dropping
food?
things off. I know that was limited last year where, you couldn't even drop their iPad off at school if they forgot it, and I would hope that we're not leaning towards that again.
seems like parents should be able to drop something off in the office. That's I think what we're all saying here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, with some of these clubs, is there a way we can make it maybe they can go outside if they so choose? I mean, we have a good 6 weeks of decent weather at the beginning of the year. Get outside if the teacher who's in charge of it, so I don't know if there's tents or they might need, or just tables outside, that kind of thing.
And potentially even like during the school day, if teachers want to take classes outside.
They do, that's
Like
an mechanism.
chairs or, there's additional supplies needed so we can spend as much time outside as possible.
They're welcome to do that if they choose. Would the board like to make that change about visitors to the school building dropping off things to come inside the office?
And I thought we were relaxing about contact through surface contacts. That they were less concerned about that.
Yeah, it was really a mechanism for face-to-face time, so they would just deposit the issue in the bin, or whatever they're delivering in the bin in the vestibule, and then we would go out and get it.
I think last year that, and correct me if I'm wrong, parents weren't able to drop off anything, and so for me, I wouldn't want a kid's whole day to, if an iPad would be necessary, to have to go without it. And so just for the item to be able to be there, if a parent was able to, those kind of circumstances is what I would be thinking.
Yeah, that's what the plan says now, is that the parents can bring things for the kids, they'll just deposit in the bin in the vestibule, so the kid won't be without, it's just a little bit more impersonal way for them to bring something up.
I'm fine with that as long as parents can drop things off. That I had the same concern about not being able to drop things off last year, but as long as we have a mechanism for that and a mechanism to get the item to the student, I'm fine.
Great.
So where are we landing on this?
Further discussion?
I'm
Oh.
wondering, so where are we landing on this? Parents can come into the office and drop stuff off?
My last comment was that I agreed with what was in the plan, that if they have a mechanism for the vestibule, that's fine, as long as parents are able to bring their items in for their
Yeah,
students.
and that's why I'm asking, because that's not, I don't think, what Dean and Jill and I just said, and Patty. I think we said we would like parents to be able to come in the office the way it was and drop things off.
Yeah,
Right.
that's my
Okay,
opinion.
John, where are you?
Is that possible? Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
rather do that.
And that's that's where the majority lands.
I'm fine with it. We'll make that change before we etch it in stone.
Okay. Other discussion? Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Casper.
Yes.
Dunlap. Malloy.
Yes.
Shalata.
Yes.
Lloyd, yes. Barry.
Yes.
Nenza.
Yes. Moving on, information items, 7.1, tentative budget for 2021.
Yes. Are you okay if I do it here, or do you want me to come up there? All right. So this is in board docs, and also there's going to be a presentation on the screen behind you. This is our preliminary budget. It is a requirement of the state that we present a preliminary budget that stays on display for 30 days, and then next month we vote on the final budget. So in my world, budgeting is a year-round process. This is where we are, the August board meeting, the preliminary budget. Next month will be the final budget. So as part of this presentation, I want to talk for a couple minutes about the results from last year compared to the budget, and then we'll look at the upcoming year's budget. So a lot of numbers, I apologize, but if you, in the first column there, I got my fancy little pointer, I'm sorry, got a new toy. Revenue compared to budget was almost right on. If you see, local was a tiny bit over, state was a tiny bit over, federal was a little bit under, but the overall budget came in at 100.13% of what we budgeted. On the expense side, we came in significantly under budget, and that was mostly due to COVID, the shutdown. If you see purchase services, the third line down, we were about $1 million under budget, and that is mostly due to buses not running. We budgeted for it, not knowing what was going to happen, and we had a long period of time where we didn't spend anything on buses. Same thing with supplies. With kids not in school, supply costs were down. The capital outlay number is just an estimate of how much we were going to spend on construction, and that's mostly a timing difference. We are going to spend all of that money. We just didn't spend it during that particular fiscal year. So you throw all that into the mix, and we were almost $4 million under budget on the expense side. So the summary revenue was $55,000 over, which is good, and the expenses were $3.7 million under for the reasons I just explained. So even though in that first column you see we budgeted a $3.5 million deficit last year, we actually ended slightly positive, $262,000 positive results for last year. Now, if you recall this, I presented this exact slide last year. It was a $3.5 million deficit, but that included some one-time things, construction and some bond special interest payments. So if you take that out and just look at what our operating numbers were, it was still a deficit. Usually we like to have that be a surplus, but it was a deficit last year of just under $400,000. And remember that number, I'm going to come back to it when I talk about the upcoming year's budget. I'm going to skip that one. So moving ahead to the upcoming year. So I'm going to start with just kind of a broad overview, then get specific, and then I'll end with the overview again. So we're starting the year with $38.6 million as a fund balance. We're anticipating revenues of $43.5 million, expenses $47.4, and that's a deficit of $3.9 million, which leaves us with a fund balance next year of $34.7. These are all just estimated numbers, but these are what we are working with. And again, even though it's a $3.9 million deficit, we have some one-time things that are not normal operations. So we have almost $1.5 million in construction, finishing up the projects at Ferrick and Cruz. And if you recall, the board voted to abate $1 million, so property tax revenues will be less by $1 million. So if you take those two things out, that puts our new operating deficit at $1.4 million. Now, if you remember, last year it was $400,000 deficit. So this year, so the deficit on an operating basis is getting a little bit worse, and it's something we're going to have to address in upcoming years. We have a very healthy fund balance, and it helps us during times like this, but this trend can't continue. So here's the revenue side, and as you can see, the majority of it, of our revenue is local. That's property taxes, interest, things like that, and then smaller amounts from the state and from the federal government, totaling $43.5 million. On the local side, then, most of that money comes from property taxes, and it's from two different levy years. So we'll get the second half of 2020 taxes, which was the CPI was 2.3%. So we're getting 2.3% in new revenue, half of that. And then it's the first half of the 2021 taxes, which the CPI for that is not known. I'm estimating 3%. It's actually probably going to be higher. Inflation is running very high right now, but I use 3% for the purpose of the budget. But when you consider the idea of the abatement, which was $1 million, our property taxes are actually going to be down by $790,000. They're up by 2%, but they're down by $1 million. And then also interest revenue continues to decline. If you recall, 2 years ago, we had $1 million in interest revenue. Last year, it was about $500,000, and now this coming year, it's going to be about $200,000. Interest rates are just very low, and as our old things roll off that we were getting 2% on, now we're having to reinvest at 0.3 or 0.4, so interest revenue is down. Food service revenue is going to be down also. We talked about how food is going to be free, but it's the local component where students are paying for their food is going away, but it's going to be offset, you'll see on the federal side, by the government reimbursing that. So you throw all of that into the mix, local revenue, which is our biggest source of revenue, is going down by 3.4% in the upcoming year. So here are the numbers. Last year it was $37.3 million, this year 36, so it's a change of negative $1.2 million, but remember we're abating $1 million, so $1 million of that is because of the abatement, and really the rest of it is because of interest going down. So that's the local side. On the state side, we are now moving to Tier 3. There's 4 tiers. Last year we were Tier 2, which is higher level of funding. The state considers us to be a little bit better funded compared to everybody else in the state, so we moved down to Tier 3. That'll give us $62,000 of additional funding, which on a $40 million budget is not a lot. Everything else from the state is being held flat. And a note at the bottom, the state still owes us $187,000 from last year, but a year ago at this time they owed us $260,000, so it's getting slowly better. So the state revenue summary, $4 million last year, $4,073,000 this year, so it's going up $64,000, 1.6%. Then on the federal side, so we talked about how food service is going to be free for everybody, and the reimbursement for the meals that we serve comes from the federal government this time. So federal revenue will be up by $300,000. It's offset by the local of negative $200,000. And then also we have the second round of the ESSER grants. Last year we got $300,000 in ESSER 1. This year we're getting $1.3 million in ESSER 2, so that's $1 million increase. That is mostly offset by, it's a grant, so the money they give us, we have to designate to certain things. So even though it's more revenue, it will lead to increased spending as well. So that's the federal side. So the numbers there, 2.4 million last year in revenue, 3.4 this year, so it's up by $1 million, and it's entirely due to that ESSER grant increase. So putting that all together, the revenue from all sources, so you can see local is down big, state is up a little, and federal is up big, and all together, it's a slight decrease in revenue compared to last year. All right, so that is the revenue side. So on the expense side, here's where our money goes, and you can see the top two lines, as it is true for most school districts, are the majority. Salaries and benefits comprise about 70% of our budget, and then with the rest spread among the things that are listed there. So 47.4 million total in expenses. And here's how each of those are changed from last year. Of course, the biggest change is salaries. Generally, those were 3% raises for the staff, and then we have additional staff, the majority of which is funded by the ESSER grant that we talked about, the revenue side. The expense side, a lot of it is here, and then also the benefits for those same people. So salaries and benefits are up. Purchase services and supplies, one's up, one's down. They about offset each other. Capital, as we're winding down the projects, the amount that we have left to spend is decreasing each year. And then that other line is where our bond payments come from. And we have some bond issues starting to roll off. We've been talking about that, and we'll see the first part of that this year. So bond payments will be lower this year. So putting that all in the mix, the total expense for the year is 47.4 million, and it's up just a little bit, 175,000 compared to last year. So I started with this slide. I want to end with it also. The district is in good financial shape, 38.6 million as a beginning fund balance. We are going to spend more than we're taking in this year, but a lot of that is on purpose. With the abatement and with construction, that we're using the fund balance on purpose. So the fund balance as of June 30th next year is projected to be down to 34.7 million. And again, so it's a 3.9 million deficit when you count everything, but then if you take out the one-time things, it's 1.4 million. Still leaves us in good financial shape, but the 1.4 is something we're going to have to address in future years. And I think that's it. Yep.
Recommended cash fund balance for Cook County is roughly 50%, correct?
Right, so.
Which would be in dollars in our case.
Oops, let me.
22 million, roughly.
Right. A school district is considered generally to be healthy if they have a fund balance that's equal to 50% of their revenues. And you can see the beginning fund balance, we're at 88%, 38 million fund balance out of 43 revenue. That's 88%. And even the 34.7 at the bottom is 80% of our revenue. So we're doing well financially.
And that's the other reason why the board's been in a position to be generous about capital, about facilities, bricks and mortar, and the reason why we've got really good and improving physical plants at all of our campuses. So we really celebrate the fiscal conservatism of this board and previous boards. It's put us in the position to be able to do that. I can't wait for you guys to see Farragut Cruise.
And it doesn't make any sense to take out a loan, to use the analogy of a homeowner, take out a loan when you have the money in the bank to pay for the home improvements.
Exactly right.
We also don't want to use those fund balances as an excuse to start having operational expenses outpace revenue, because that's like using your credit card for
Groceries.
milk and gas.
Yeah.
You're gonna need more next time.
So no action required on that. This is just information. Next month, we'll do the final budget that the board will be asked to vote on. And at that time, I'll do another shorter presentation and go over what has changed, if there's any changes between now and then.
Jay Money and Keegan, and for the board's information, Darcy asked me to relocate the regular September meeting to Cruise. I believe your announcement that's required as part of the preliminary final budget sequence will need to be updated and reissued. And Keegan, since we're gonna be at a different location, let's make sure that the community knows where we're gonna be for that regular September meeting.
May I ask a question, going back to transportation? So for the parents the kids who are going to be leaving school later, like how soon the parents are going to find out, like what students those are? Because I know a lot of parents count on their middle school child to get home in time to pick up their grade school child.
Yep, I think a letter goes out from each school at the end of this week, maybe, or next week, and it will be in the letter that goes at the normal time. So we're getting close to finalizing all the routes, but it will go out next week, I would say, that information.
7.2, revised policies, first read.
And so there was a good number of these that are being proposed that are on the list of 5-year review. Press does a 5-year review of all policies so that no policy ever gets stale, and they update the footnotes and the references, legal references, and some of the terminology. That's a large majority of this. But the policy committee is also recommending 5.330, which is a change in the maturity of vacation days for non-union classified staff. And what's motivating that recommendation is that language is part of the pending ESP union negotiations that you'll be considering a draft of the new contract language. It includes these changes in it, and this board's always treated non-union and union employees similarly. So the policy committee is recommending these changes so that classified staff vacation matures similarly, whether they're union or non-union. The rest are not substantive changes.
And there's no action on this at this time. This is the first month's read, and then we'll have action on these next month. Comments, questions? Okay, 8.1, communications. Do we have any? We do not. Hearing that we do not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Secretary, call the roll.
Casper.
Yes.
Dunlap. Yes. Malloy.
Yes.
Gelada.
Yes.
Lloyd, yes. Barry.
Yes.
Nenza.
Yes, we are adjourned.